Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. This episode we have Netflix 260th film from 2020. It's the Indian Hindi language thriller drama Raat Akeli Hai. It's directed by Honey Trehan and stars Nawazuddin Siddiqui, Radhika Apte, Shweta Tripathi, Aditya Srivastava, Tigmanshu, Dhulia, and Shivani, Raghuvanshi. I'm Jesse. I'm here solo. As always, most of the time with the international features, I apologise for my pronunciations, but hopefully if you're here listening, you're on board to check this film out, hear my thoughts about it. As always, we will do probably some spoilers along the way, so if you're keen on checking this one out, give us a pause and come back later on. We're going to start the show with the Fast Flicks, where we do a quick little summary of what the film is all about. So this one is about a cop who sets out to investigate the murder of an older man in an influential family. Yes, this is it's a murder mystery, almost whodunit film. So if you like crime films, and maybe this one might be for you. Before we actually talk in a bit of detail about the film, how did this end up on Netflix? The production, how did this all come together? So it was shot on location over a period of 46 days, which was to schedule, and was meant to have a theatrical release, as with a lot of these films during this period of time. COVID sort of shut cinemas, so it couldn't go to cinema, so Netflix picked it up. This film, this is a little bit of a thing about the film, but it contains possibly the last known on-screen appearance of this controversial Indian cream, this fairness cream, which makes the skin look fair, called Fair and Lovely, which has been removed from sale because of backlash, and I'm pretty sure that's what I'm talking about, if I remember the scenes and what that was. The director, Torres, said about this film, he said, "Honestly, I really wanted this film to be seen in a theatre, but would people step out and shell $2,000 to watch a film starring Nawazuddin Siddiqui and Radhika Apte? I'm not sure. Unless you get great reviews and great word of mouth, then perhaps. But given the lockdown, I'm glad it was released on Netflix because a lot more people have seen the film now." So obviously wanted a theatrical release, but was happy with the Netflix release in the end. He also went on to say that the first cut in this film, I might mention this film is like 2.5 hours long. So he mentioned that his first cut was 2 hours and 35 minutes without the credits. Then he recut it for a second cut, which had 5 minutes less, and everyone from the production company loved it, but they did say that it needed to be trimmed. But nobody could give him advice on exactly where. So he said, I can't really bring it down more than 10 minutes, although the studio wanted it to be under 2 hours or 2 hours and 5 minutes tops. So he had a month to figure this out, and a day after the screening, the producers said, when you come to show me the film, look me in the eye and say, this is the film that you really want to make. It's 2 hours, 2.5 hours, or even 3 hours. And when you get that kind of support, he said it really liberated him. So said dream production team to work with. So really happy in the end with how he got this film out and about. This was released on the 31st of July 2020 on Netflix worldwide, filmed in and around India. Pretty successful on the Indian awards circuit. Had 4 wins and a further 15 nominations across a whole bunch of awards. The Hello Hall of Fame India Awards, the IWM Digital Awards, the Indian Film and TV Awards, the Hit List OTT Awards, the Filmfare OTT Awards, and the FOI Online Awards, as well as the Masala Awards. So well recognised, this film across the world. I guess, the title of Raat Akeli Hai, that is, if we directly translate that from Hindi, it's called The Night is Lonely, and that makes sense. Once you watch the film, we'll probably talk about that as we go. In Portuguese, it was called In the Solitude of Night, and in Romania, it was called Alone in the Dark. So all play with that idea of night and darkness. So very interesting indeed. What did the critics and audiences think about this film? This is quite interesting, to be honest. If we look at Rotten Tomatoes, it sits at 100%. That's a perfect score. It is only on 8 reviews, but still classified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience has it extremely high too, at 89%. That's on more than 100 ratings. IMDb's got about 19,000 ratings, but still very positive. Sits at a 7.2 out of 10. Letterboxd again, positive, 3.2. Usually if it's over 3, we're saying it's pretty positive. So 3.2 out of 5 on about 3,500 ratings, been logged by a bit over 5,000. And then Metacritic didn't have anything. So not enough people have seen it on Metacritic, so we'll leave that one out. But what are my early thoughts on this one, I guess? I think I got to start off and say this has 14 different characters that you've got to try and keep track of, and 9 of these characters are from one family alone. And my head hurts just thinking about it. So I sort of struggled at times to keep up with who was who, but this is still a rather effective film. It's a good ensemble cast, the performances are good, the story's good, and sort of done in that whodunit mystery style of Agatha Christie. So well worth a watch, I think, if you're into that style of film. Let's talk about the characters. I'm not going to talk about all 14 characters. I'm just going to focus on the main ones, I think. And, our main character is Jatil. He is this hard-working cop. I think the translation of his name, Jatil, it means difficult or complex. So that even gives you a little bit of information about who he is, because, as I said, he's a cop and he sort of has this investigative skill where he wants to make sure he ticks the boxes of all aspects of a crime, even when he's faced with pushback or bureaucratic hurdles and bosses who are trying to stop him from doing his job. He is hardworking, but he does live with his mother, and his mother puts a lot of pressure on him to find love and marry and settle down and have grandkids for her and those types of things. But he does have his own version, I guess, of who he wants to settle down with, and it's very different from what his mother says. And his work sort of helps him keep his mind off this. Being this single male in this society, in this world, seems like it's a bit of a thing that's not seen in good light. And he's also insecure about the colour of his skin, which I mentioned before. We see him using this cream throughout various stages of the film, and obviously we're going to talk about Radha next, who is this female that Jatil sort of ends up having an invested interest in during his investigation of this case. And she she's about to be married to this much older man, Raghuvanshi Singh, and he's the head of this family with these 9 people that we're talking about. But she becomes the main suspect to his death, I guess, as well as Vikram, her lover, as well. So, as I mentioned, Jatil's got this sort of soft spot for her. As he's met her in the past, we see this through a flashback, and he's helped her, or he thinks he's helped her. And throughout the film, he sort of falls for her, possibly blinding him at stages with his detective work. But we do know Radha's had a very tough life. Her mother's died. Her father seems pretty horrible. He sold her off, these types of things. So interesting little dynamics with those 2 characters. And they're the 2 that we sort of follow the most, I guess. Then the others are sort of like the suspects or the people around. So Vikram, I mentioned before, this is Raghuvansh's nephew. He's having this affair with Radha. They both become suspects. Then we've got Vasudha Singh. And as I've mentioned before, I'm going to spoil parts, so this is probably the last chance without this film being spoiled for you to pause. But Vasudha Singh, she's Raghuvansh's niece and Vikram's sister. So we find out at the end of the film she's the actual murderer, but Jatil sort of puts it in as self-defense, I guess. From what we see in this film, Vikram and Vasudha's mother, she's a piece of work. Not a very nice person. She's almost the villain, the mother of this film, I guess, because she doesn't really care for her daughter. The only thing that she's interested in is her son Vikram, I guess. And at the end of the film, when he sort of shuns her, we see this moment where she goes to kill herself, and when she's sort of contemplating this, and she hears a voice of her child and thinks it's Vikram, but then when she realizes it's her daughter Vasudha, she ends up taking her own life. So sort of shows the little care that she shows for her daughter. The only other people I'll sort of touch on, we had this guy called Muna Raja. He's this politician. He sort of ordered the murder of Rajveer Singh's first wife, and the driver, which we saw in the start of this film, which I'll talk about soon. But the idea that he was, a politician who's a part of these dodgy dealings, really bad. And then Chuni is the daughter of the driver that was killed at the start. She's fearful of her own life the whole way through because she's just sort of on the periphery. And then we do see this guy called Nan Du, who is Jatil's partner. It's nice to see a different cop. Sometimes in a investigative police murder mystery sort of thing, you see 2 different cops, and he plays that part. He plays the opposite sort of detective to Jatil. He doesn't have the ability to look at the overall picture of a crime like Jatil does. He just wants to sort of zone in on suspects and go from there. So I think that's the best I can do with the characters. The director, Honey Trehan, his feature debut, he's got this upcoming film called Punjab 95, but from what I gather, very well known in the Bollywood genre for being a casting director. Has about 47 casting credits, so impressive work there, and obviously pretty trusted to do a film like this. Scenes, let's talk about some scenes. What are some scenes that I enjoyed? What didn't I like? I think I sort of touched on this a little bit. The opening scene is this car being followed in the dark by this sort of van or this truck, and it's done in the dark of the night. All we really see are the headlights of the cars. Then we see this car being knocked over. We see some murders. Just a real intriguing start to the film. I thought that was a really good way to start the film. There's a scene later on where Jatil goes to meet this butcher. This butcher guy is the driver of the car from that opening scene. And they sort of have this stare-off where he's like challenging him to come to the police station, and we know that he's working for Mona Raja, who's the politician, and he's this butcher, so he's cutting up meat, and he's got the blood of the meat, and he uses it on his hands, and he uses this to sort of re-put a poster of Mona Raja back on the wall. Really effective, just to sort of highlight the connections. I did like it when Jatil and his partner Nandu, they're on their motorbikes, sort of travelling between crime scenes, and they just stop on this bridge and have a big biffo in the middle of the road in front of the general public over this case and over their dealings, and possibly Jatil's affection towards Radha as well. So I thought that was well done. I think when Nandu starts investigating further and sort of opening his eyes and realising that maybe Jatil was on the right track in his further investigations, I like that because he's got all the evidence. He's ready to go tell the police officers and the politicians and all that sort of stuff, and he watches all these men in a room together, and he sort of hides the evidence under his jacket without sharing it with them. I like that. I thought that was effective. And finally, the grandma, Chuni's grandma, her revenge that she gets on the butcher with some gasoline and some fire, and that was just a really good scene. I like that too. There's only one thing I didn't really like. There's this scene where there's this shootout between the butcher and Jatil, and Radha's in there as well. I just thought that went on way too long, so wasn't a big fan of that. All right, what are some themes? What are some more ideas? What's this film trying to say? I think the idea, I've touched on this, I guess, about being a dedicated cop, having persistence, finding the truth, beating up a corrupt system. And there's lots of societal values of the Indian system that we're seeing here too. The idea of marriage and patriarchy and reputation and family prestige. I think realistically, patriarchy needs to be touched more on, because this is seen throughout the film through Jatil. He sort of believes in that system, and unfortunately in this film, all the women in the film are pretty much being victimized by men. So I think it's sort of highlighting that that's not the way to go. It's not the way to move forward. And we do see that through Vikram's mother too, I guess, where I mentioned before, she goes to extreme lengths to sort of secure her son's future. So that's there. I think the idea too of the colour of skin, Jatil's constantly looking in a mirror. I mentioned before, he uses this cream, and this sort of shows his progression too. He moves away from his ideal version of what a woman should be too. So a bit of progression, I like that too. The title, the direct translation about the darkness of night, the night, it's lonely. The opening I touched on before, that highlights this with the headlights of the cars, and we see lots and lots when Jatil wakes up in the middle of the night. He does some of his work at night too, which is really, really highlighted as well. Trains play a big part in this film too. We constantly see that's where Radha and Jatil meet, and they get back on the train, and this idea of constantly moving, the idea of freedom on a train. And there's this quote from Detective Poirot from Agatha Christie, I guess, and his quote was, "Life is like a train. It goes on, and that is a good thing, and that is so, because the train gets to its journey end at last." I like that idea. Trains are very important, very symbolic, especially across the world, and we've seen that in a couple of films too. And the last thing I'll say, it's a cruel world. Not everything in the world is rainbows and sunshines and lollipops. It's just, it's a cruel world. There are tough things that happen in the world too. All right, what did I take away from this film? I think in Hindi films, we've done a lot of Hindi films on this show, and I think I'm often critical of songs that just jump into the middle of films randomly. But I think the ones used in this film were good. They didn't take away from the narrative. They sort of added to the context what was on screen, rather than just being these big dance numbers that felt out of place. And there were no dance numbers, so maybe that helped as well. I really liked the music in this film, effective at certain times. Questions, ponderings. I think these are just some things that I've seen. I think there's this commentator called Shreya Minchoda who made this statement and said, "Netflix has failed to market its movies over and over again. It promoted this film Raat Akeli Hai as a gripping murder mystery. In its execution, it's actually a drama revolving around class difference. This is not the first time Netflix has made this error. This was simply another failure that joined the long list." To be honest, I haven't looked at, a lot of the promotional material isn't in English, so I didn't necessarily understand or look at it. But for me, I think that this was a murder mystery. So I'm not sure what this commentator is saying. Yes, I think there's a lot about class in this as well. And you've got this family that, are so protected by politicians and the police that they can almost get away with whatever they want. But all you need is one good police officer who comes from a different class. So I think they're joined together. I think it is a murder mystery which highlights the differences of class as well. So I like that. I think... This is another quote from the makers of the film. They describe the film in these words. This is almost like their storyline or their logline, I guess. The most powerful usually hide the darkest secrets. What happens when a small town cop is summoned to investigate the case of an extremely powerful local politician? How far is he willing to go into the darkness to search for the truth? I like that. That's intriguing. That sets the story up. So I think that's a good little story question or whatever. Multiple sentences there. Last thing, nursing homes. There's a big part of this film where Jatil gets this envelope and it says like nursing home on the front of it. And it plays a really key part in solving the crime. From what I gather, in India, a nursing home is like a hospital. It was very confusing for me from English context or in Australian context, I guess, because a nursing home is where you send old people when they can't live at home by themselves. So that sort of confused me a bit throughout the plot. So I thought that was an interesting little pickup that, and the envelope had nursing home on it in English as well. So interesting little thing there that sort of confused me, I guess. All right, ready to wrap this up. I think we give the film a rating out of 5. Well, for me, like, I don't know, as hard as I did find it to follow at times, I was still interested. And I think I was interested in where it was going to go. I was interested in Jatil as a detective. I was interested in the ideas that they were playing with in this film. It looked really good. It was performed really well. This ensemble cast did a great job. I think it's worth a watch. I'm giving it a 3.5 out of 5. Definitely worth a watch from me. We're on socials. We've got X, formerly known as Twitter. We've got Facebook. We've got Instagram. Give us a follow. Get involved in our posts for the film. So for this week, I'm going to chuck a question up for this film. The question is, would you watch another film with Jatil as the detective? I think I'm definitely keen on his character, keen to see where he goes, what he does, whether he comes back to continue his crime-solving job. I don't know. I liked him. I thought it was intriguing enough to warrant another story from him. We are back next week, as always. Hopefully next week my voice is going to be back to normal. But next week we've got a dance comedy from 2020. It's called Work It, directed by Laura Taruso. It stars Sabrina Carpenter, Lisa Koshy, Kanan Lonsdale, Michelle Bateau, and Jordan Fisher. So get on board, give that one a watch if you're keen to check out a dance comedy for next week. As always, thanks for hanging around, listening to this chat. Hope you enjoyed this film. I think it's well worth a watch, and I'll see you next week.